Colleagues, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And the point about Westminster City Council, how on earth did someone who was working in a little local authority become the head of the largest public service comms organisation in the world? Well, the man to thank for that is, of course, our very own Professor Jeff French. Because a long time ago, I was sitting in a library in Oldham, which is a town in northern England, quite a hard working-class town that has a history of problems, social and economic problems, and it was a job I did in my spare time while I was also head of communications at Westminster to learn about a different part of the country. But I was particularly interested because at one of these conferences many years ago, before many of you were born, apart from perhaps Jeff and Bill and I, Matt was probably still in nappies, I came across this thing called social marketing. And there were nudges, and there were shoves, and there were smacks and hugs. And I thought this was fascinating, because I had got into a career in political communication, which is an important and noble discipline, as a press officer. And as a press officer, I thought this communication business is simply about spinning and shouting and quoting the line and doing the other side in and so on, and that is communication. And then I listened to Jeff and I read the books, and so I thought there is a different element to communication, which is what enabled me to take on the role of running the Conservative Party in 1999. I said, we ought to do campaigns. I said, I know a bit about campaigns, sort of social marketing. What's social? What is this stuff? And that is important because I was sitting in this library in Oldham in the autumn of 2012, and the phone rang, and there was a recruitment consultant on the line who said, do you want to apply to be the Director of UK Government Communication? And I thought, no, that sounds far too scary. But I spoke to my wife, who said, well, look, if you don't apply for it, you'll never forgive yourself. You'll always wonder what might have happened. And I hope that's a good lesson for all of us in the room. You are all good enough to apply for any role that you feel that you want to do and something that you want to love. And please go for it. I recruit a lot of people all the time, and the best candidates are the ones who do slightly doubt themselves, but give it a go and are prepared to come forward. But that's not the whole purpose of the story. I went to the posh buildings in Whitehall and went for the job interview and so on. And to my surprise, I was successful. And I said to the Civil Service Commissioner and the permanent secretaries who interviewed me, I said, well, afterwards, I said, well, why did I get the job? Why not all the good government communicators who I know had applied? Senior directors of communications. And they said, well, actually, you had a plan and a model. And I took the Decides model, which is an integral part of social marketing and the other references I've made today, and we developed that into Westminster to our own campaign model, which we described as ROSI, Research, Objective, Strategy, Implementation and Evaluation. And there was that sense that the British government needed a communicator who actually understood the whole of communications that led me to where I am. So I agreed to speak at this conference today because I hope that this is a story about how you learn to do communications, sometimes in quite hostile environments, develop a model, build that model, use it in quite a complex environment, the United Kingdom government, develop a single plan and then deliver what I hope I can illustrate is in many cases, and you've heard from my colleague Anna from PAT this morning, world-class social marketing. Now, there is another reason that the government was looking for a head of communication in 2012, and it was that they had decided that they needed a new approach to communication because they had tried a model of communication that said spend as much as it takes and see what works. So by 2010, the UK government spent just over £1 billion on government communication. Stopped counting at that point. Had about 300 campaigns, 600 logos, 1,800 websites. And that's fine if you pass the L'Oreal test, if you're worth it. So when the coalition government came into office in 2010, they said to my predecessors, so what do we get for our £1 billion? And my predecessors said slightly unwisely, we don't know, but there's lots of it. And Nick Clegg and Francis Maud and David Cameron said, well, that's all very well, but we're in the middle of a financial crisis. How about you spend half of what you currently spend, which is still quite a lot of money, measure what you get from that, and then we'll talk about what we do going forward. So 2,500 practitioners, including many people who still work in marketing today and formerly worked in the Central Office of Information, the heart of the government's marketing operations set up after the Second World War, lost their jobs because they couldn't prove their value. And that is an important lesson for what we then did next. On the screen, you can see our modern communications operating model, and you can see that marketing is absolutely central to government communication, and therefore bringing together all the aspects of marketing together with external affairs and the other internal communications and media is critical to what we do. I suspect many people in the room do not appreciate the depth of social marketing activity within the United Kingdom government. In terms of national security, we have what we call the fusion doctrine. And the fusion doctrine requires, in addressing any national security issue, from cyber security to combating the threat of Daesh in the Middle East, you deliver a response that is fused, that has economic, security, and communication elements to it. And therefore, we have to work to convince the diplomats and the soldiers and the security services about the value of marketing in that context. And to achieve that, what we do is say, look, essentially, the marketing offer in national security is ABCD. It's about building alliances, it's about achieving behaviour change, it is about providing capability and deterrence. And I hope that serves as an example about how you build social marketing into an organisation. It's all very well to talk about social marketing, and that, I fear, is a concept that sometimes gets a bit misunderstood, or perhaps people don't have the patience to understand it. And I was very clear when I came into work for government that I had to have a nudge to get people to think in a way that would develop their marketing capability. They didn't like Rosie, I'd use that at Westminster. I said, not invented here, don't want to do that. So we talked about it and we came up with Oasis, which they did like because they had invested in it and worked it out. And you can see Oasis on the screen. But it is interesting, the power from the work of the press officers to the internal communicators to the more formal marketing side of the operation, that having that common operating model means everyone thinks much more carefully about their objectives and who their audience are and working in their shoes, and then through the rest of the process. Of course, beneath that, we need the marketing tools to deliver the impact that we talked about. And you can see those on the screen. And it's been interesting to me how developing an approach that says you need to think for any audience, especially as Bill was just saying and talking about millennial audiences, think very carefully about the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation they have to change their behaviour for public good, and then make any intervention that you want to apply easy, attractive, social, and timely. I think that the World Social Marketing Conference and your participation in it is a great thing and an important thing and will do good. And fundamentally, my role as Head of Government Communications is to save, improve and enhance people's lives. As Matt said at the start, I have a variety of roles, but fundamentally it's about three things. It's about management of the communications for the Prime Minister's office and the Cabinet Office team. Then it is about leadership of the Government Communications Service, and that is expressed through the Government Communications Plan. And then, as head of profession, my job is to identify what is best practice and make that the standard of our work. That is a very privileged position, but it does enable me to have the oversight and the government communications plan. There are about 140, essentially, social marketing campaigns. From the Great Britain campaign, which is to bring trade and tourism to the UK, a £60 million campaign with 100 events every month around the world, to the campaign run by the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, which spends about £10,000, a £10,000 budget. Its job is to stop people mixing seawater and alcohol. So if any of you are putting seawater in your gin or vodka, please desist. The serious purpose of this campaign is to stop people going swimming after 4 or 5 pints of lager or whatever they drink, because that can kill you. But nevertheless, from that £10,000 campaign to nudge people not to drink and swim, to that £60 million campaign to bring investment to the United Kingdom, that gives you an idea of the scale of our work. If you're interested in this, you can Google GCS. First, you will get the Glasgow Coma Scale, and underneath that, I hope you'll get the Government Communications Service. And there is a website, and all the documents that we produce are set out on that website. But I recognised in 2018 that our marketing practice was good, and we deliver some terrific work. But unless you are continuing to improve and build and change, you are going backwards. I often have the concept of measuring performance of my colleagues. I say, look, in the civil service, basically we have 3 categories for measuring people's performance: exceeding, satisfactory, or must improve. And I said, in my experience as a manager, staff are either in 2 positions. They're either exceeding and motoring on, or they need improving because they've stalled and are in danger of going backwards. But that is to explain why, in terms of running the Government Communications Service, I've been utterly determined that we continue to improve. And as technology changes and society changes and the way that the world is changing politically, we need to keep moving forward. Hence the year of marketing. And we set out and we talked to marketing, commercial and social marketing experts in the field, and we came up with a range of issues which we brought together into 6 opportunities that we see for marketeers. And I'm going to briefly run through those and illustrate them with a campaign. The Mates Matter campaign and the use of data, as it says there, has achieved a genuine social outcome. But thinking differently about how we approached that campaign and using the data to understand what influences young men particularly to drink and drive or not drink and drive has been central to our success in that campaign. You've heard from Public Health England earlier, but working across government and talking to the government digital service, saying, what can we do to improve the service that we offer to citizens? And the GDS developing on the smart speakers up to 1,200 pieces of information where you can now, as the public, ask Google Alexa or whatever tool you have a question, and it will give you an answer, and bringing social marketing into the digital age through the social marketing. The issue that I spent a lot of my last 2 years dealing with, that of Brexit. And this is important. The example here is to demonstrate that it was a multi-channel campaign, but also because communication sits at the centre of the government effort on Brexit, explaining that you can use your communication to reassure, to offer, to, in a sense, manage demand for information about Brexit, but also bringing into the discussion the fact that unless you provide recognised, truthful, dispassionate information, we will not succeed. Snapchat and Instagram, in terms of thinking about new platforms. We have an ongoing discussion with the big platforms, the so-called FANGs, but particularly Facebook, the F and the G, Google. Google come into my office from time to time and they say, how can we help you? And I say, pay your taxes. Thank you. And they say, really? I say, yes, really pay your taxes. But we recognise, perhaps too late, perhaps slightly like a frog being boiled, that we had lost a degree of transparency, of the ability to calculate value particularly in terms of programmatic media buying. So when we developed the new media buying contract, which was worth about £150 million a year, we specified transparency and value and accountability into that contract. But those other platforms are important as well. Around the world, I think one of the major challenges for social marketeers is how to get people to save more for their retirement. And we have a successful campaign on this, which is illustrated on the screen. But getting into new areas, like using genuine families on Gogglebox to talk about what they think about pensions and how they would respond to the challenge to save for their old age, partly addresses Bill's argument, or at least is part of our response to Bill, about how you deal with the trust issue. Finally, knife crime. Be brave, be bold, be confident. The use of knives by young men and young women in the UK is a tragic phenomenon in recent years which has re-emerged. And we realised that if we were to develop a campaign to tackle that, then we had to use real people who had used knives, in some cases had been convicted of knife use, and make them the faces of our campaigns, and working with franchises as well. And that has contributed to a significant reduction in knife crime. I want to finish with 2 points, one on disinformation and then on evaluation. This is important because social marketing is a noble and important role in our society. But as you will have gathered, there are those out there who see the internet as an ability to mislead, to set people against people, to divide our societies. And increasingly our marketing work has gone into the area of tackling disinformation. These campaigns and these materials are readily available, and we developed this Resist Toolkit, which sets out how we identify, assess, and then deal with disinformation. Remember, fake news is one thing. My 15-year-old daughter said to me the other day, "Does Theresa May really skateboard?" I said, "No. Where did you read that?" As you say as a sort of 50-year-old. Where did you read it? "Well, actually, Dad, I saw it on Snapchat." I said, "What's this Snappy Chat thing?" But, you know, it doesn't matter whether Theresa May skateboards or not. It's fake news, it's entertainment. But disinformation as a malign attempt, usually from a hostile state, to divide society does matter. And if you think of the anti-vax campaigns and the tragic return and spread of measles, then the social marketing tools to tackle disinformation, which will pop up in other areas too, is important. Bill mentioned partnerships. I completely agree with him. We calculate the value of the partnerships that we build with businesses worth the government about £60 million a year. And finally, in terms of accountability, going back to the billion-pound question, is that what do you do? Is it worth it? We have built into our systems I hope, what is a highly effective way of assessing our value. There's a picture on the screen of the ministerial board in session, so we're accountable to ministers. And ministers as elected representatives are quite a powerful test of, is this campaign worth it? Could I stand up in Parliament and defend it? I have overall accountability for that. And every major government campaign that we run goes through a process of professional assurance that seeks to understand whether the campaign delivers against the best social marketing principles and is value for money. Beneath that is the Director of Comms Group that provides peer review, and an independent strategy and evaluation council which is there to assess whether our work has impact. And that process of peer review is essential to our work, as is the evaluation slide on the screen now, which sets out how we approach things. That's the conclusion. Those are my details. I will make the slides available. I have sped through that in the interests of time and to avoid boring you. I will finish on the secret social marketing tool we have at 10 Downing Street, and I'll advise any agencies or organisations in the room that I sometimes think the great policies that we launch have impact, and that's tremendous. But I know the one thing that will generate behaviour change and goodwill and a sense of well-being amongst people who view the activities of the Prime Minister's office are the escapades of Larry the cat. Larry is a lovely cat, the Downing Street cat. He has a mortal enemy, Palmerston, the evil Foreign Office cat. And to separate the two warring felines, the British Finance Ministry, the Treasury, got their own cat called Gladstone. Gladstone is a very stupid cat. And Gladstone was sent to Downing Street, got lost underneath the Treasury buildings, and a search party had to be sent out. So that is simply to lighten the atmosphere, but does illustrate, I hope, the sheer occasional wackiness of life at the centre of the British government. Challenging, interesting, and social marketing means we do powerful and important things for public good, but occasionally there are lighter moments as well. Thank you all very much.